up and running. Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday. What a week. I mean, it's been one hell of a week. I want to say for almost everybody, we're kind of officially now in the fall season, which is really, it's intense, right? The days are getting shorter. We are up approaching our holiday timelines and holiday schedules. How we're starting to think about things like event planning and markdowns for the rest of the year is getting really intense. Any sort of last minute product release schedules. As you guys can tell, I haven't been getting much sleep because it's supposed to be a pretty intense e-commerce and holiday Q4. So today we're going to go over something going to be a little bit dry, but important, and I'm going to do my best to make it as exciting as possible. We're going to be going over getting your financials ready to launch, and I think this is really important. It's actually questions that I probably get asked more often. So for those with me and my work and what I do, I'm the CEO and founder of Scaling Retail, and so at Scaling Retail, we're really launching, scaling, and growing brands. And while you might be asking yourself, hey, is anyone actually launching, scaling, or growing a brand right now in this climate? The answer is yes. There are a lot of businesses out there today that are quite successful that will be launching in the next, I would say, 6 months or so. So if you're wondering, is this still the right time? Should I pursue down this path? Yes, it is. However, getting your financials together and starting to get a good understanding of what that looks like is ultimately going to help you the most. So today we're going to talk a little bit about, financial plan as they're launching, right? What does that need to look like? Those of you guys who are tuning in who already have brands and who are kind of in a more established position, would love for you to chime in terms of your advice on financial planning. But I've been behind of so many brands at this point in time that working through financial plans is really easy for me. So I'm not a CPA, but boy, can I go to a company. Okay, so let's about budgeting and planning. Those of you guys who are familiar with my work and my philosophy will know that I am an avid believer in setting aside more money for marketing than you can than you do for product development and for inventory. And so one of the most important things, guys, as you're looking at building out your platforms and as you're looking at building out your launch budgets, is to really take a look and say, what are the opportunities to, what's a real first-time investment, and what are going to be the investments going to have to be recurring over time. So did I kind of approach this as almost like, if I were to never sell anything, right, what would that monthly budget look like? Then the next question is, if I were to sell things, right, what does that scalable or what does that variable budget look? So that's like a really big kind of key difference. Then you obviously have your first time costs, right, for launch. And I want to go over what that should look like. Now, there are going to be some ranges in terms of what your budgets, the over-unders can be. But at the end of the day, guys, if you want to get this done the right way, you are going to make some investments. And, one of our biggest things that we preach at Scaling Retail is, you get what you're for. And if you can't leverage resources and financial resources, and you have to leverage people resources, right? And that's who do you know, right, in the space who's going to be able to give you leverage on things, right? It's all about leverage when you're launching. Okay. So let's start to break down some of these fixed costs and kind of one-time startup costs, and then what are going to be the things more recurring that you're going to be planning for. So number one, everything that has to do with building your brand assets. So what does that mean? Well, that means number one, thinking about things like, your brand identity. You should be doing it one and done. Should be spending money with the right agent to be able to do that right the first time. I don't want you to spend $3,000 working with someone who doesn't know what you're doing to then find out that your brand isn't market ready. So when it comes to an investment that you want to spend, please do make sure that you're spending the right amount of money with the right agencies, getting the right kind of work that you need, unless, of course, you can leverage the access of great graphic designers. Now, the difference, guys, between hiring a graphic designer to help you with your work and hiring an agency is the following. At Scaling Retail, one brand identities, what we do is we have a dedicated creative director, right? We have someone who most of the time has built out the brand identity that we've produced. So that is like, what are the price points looking, brand value proposition, right? All of those things heavily inform what the identity looks like. So if you just go and say, hey, I have this brand, I have this idea, and I want to get a logo, well, trust me, you're going to get something really crappy because you're not going to know exactly who you're selling it to, why you're selling it, and what the brand value prop is. So do yourself a huge favor, not get a logo until you have your brand identity. Until you have your brand DNA. So first step is brand DNA. It's hard to do that on your own, mostly because it is a process that requires you to be very experienced, not just saying, I think that I know it's going to work in the market, but it's a little bit more in depth. And how do I know this is going to work? What's my competitive set? What's my advantage? So budget planning, right? So you have your brand DNA, you have your brand identity. Again, challenging things to do on your own because we tend to be overly committed to the brand that we are developing ourselves. Even when it comes to things like, anything that's personal that touches your brand, when it is your own business, it's really hard to be, objective, right? When you're doing it yourself. And you can also find yourself in a spiral. So, right, people. Then your brand identity, you're then looking at your website development. Again, another one-time fixed cost. You are going to need monthly maintenance. Most people forget the fact that websites do break and you do get errors and, code breaks, plugins become no longer working. You just have to switch ESPs, email service providers, update things on the website. So you should be looking at your web a one-time thing, and then you need to be looking at it as like an fee. But website should be a one-time thing. Then you're also looking at your communication and marketing strategy. So that is how you speak to your customer, the frequency by which you speak, and then also, what do you say and what do you not say? It becomes almost kind of your brand verbal guidelines, right? Again, one-time cost. Execution of marketing and ongoing marketing plan is a more frequent cost, but setting the tone and voice of your brand, that's a one fixed cost. Okay, those are kind of one-time fixed costs. Everything else when it comes to, legal, like obviously filing your first trademark, setting up your business licensing, all of those things are also one-time things. However, you are going to find on a yearly basis, you're going to be spending money for your, find your business open in whatever state you have the entity. So again, legal also has kind of one time, and then also these more maintenance kind of yearly things you're going to have to plan for. So once you've assigned, and I would say, in terms of what those budgets look like, you're probably looking at like anywhere from these one-time fixed costs. That's anywhere from, $50,000 to $75,000 to kind of get your business from a very strong external standpoint, kind of ready to go as a one-time cost. Oftentimes when we're doing consulting with clients, we will come in and we become a monthly expenditure, usually up until launch, right? So if you do need to have a consultant across various sectors, whether it's a production consultant, a CEO consultant, et cetera, really do have a strong understanding if this is someone who's going to help you just get to launch something that you need, right? Having that understanding is really going to save you in terms of budgeting and planning. Now, the next thing that I would consider would be taking a look at things like, so now you kind of get yourself up to getting ready to launch. The other costs that are going to be ongoing that you're going to want to plan for are things like your fulfillment. So that is going to be your shipping costs to your customers. You're also going to be planning a budget for packaging. I was just talking to someone the other day, planning your packaging costs, I think, are something that we don't often really take that much into consideration as much as we should. And that's because as creatives, right, we oftentimes will ask ourselves, we want to design the most important or the best version of blah, 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 blah. Unfortunately, what happens at the end of the day is if your packaging becomes big, fancy, beautiful unboxing experience, you're going to have to be adding quite a few dollars onto your bottom line, the cost of goods to ship out that product. So what I would say, day and age, everyone's very much concerned with things like, environmental causes, making sure things are recyclable. So please make sure that, your packaging costs end up being quite lean because, again, it's order over time. Other considering are things like hang tags, labels, right? All of those, the setup fees, all of that is going to be a one thing, meaning you're going to set up all of those factory files and everything with your label makers, with your hang tag makers in the beginning, and then you're going to kind of be on reorder. But remember, the first time you guys get samples of everything, just like a garment, it's going to be considerably higher. So I would say keep all of that into consideration kind of as you guys are planning out, these costs, right, as like one-time things versus the things that are reorderable. Now, unfortunately, right, when it comes to getting things ready for launch, there's a huge variance here between things that you're going to be allocating to in marketing. So what am I talking about? Well, obviously, when it comes to things like public relations, right, you have a big PR firm can cost you $1 a month to $15,000 a month, right? It's a really big delta. How do you decide who you're going to work with? PR, I think, is obviously a non-negotiable, super important. You need it to get in front of editors. You can certainly spearhead PR on your own, but the question then comes down to, are you the best person and is that the best use of your time, right? So understanding things like opportunity cost of your time is very important during the start phase. So you have your PR costs, you then also have your advertising costs. Now, this is another area that most people will try to shortcut. They'll say, I'm going to run my own ads. Well, trust me, again, opportunity cost. Are you really the best person to be taking time outside of your day-to-day to be running advertising? Is that really worth time? Or is it better to then hire, an agency or a freelancer to take over your advertising, right? So that might be something worth looking into, right? And those fees can obviously vary as well. So when it comes to these marketing fees, you're looking on the advertising side anywhere between $2,000 a month to $5,000, $7,000 a month to run your advertising. And those fees are going to be based off of how big the agency is, what kind of systems and software they're using, how many platforms, and what the budget is that you're spending. Important component, looking at your marketing spend, because digital, I think, can certainly take a big piece of the market share. Next on digital for planning, right? So these things like PR, advertising, these are ongoing costs. You're probably going to start to implement those costs, I would say, about 3 months before you start launching. With PR, it might be 2 months before. With your digital advertising, it might be a month before, because you need to ramp things up and get things set up. It's not like you open up site and then it's like, hey, I'm going to start ads, right? You need to warm up the engine so it can kind of be operational and run in the most efficient way possible. So those are the things on PR and marketing I think are quite important. Also, you may be considering things like programmatic advertising. That could be quite useful. You might also be considering things. So programmatic, basically, at the auction, buying ad space on a variety of different platforms. So you might be buying ad space on, Refinery 9 as like a media, then Refinery 20 might be auctioning off that banner space to another third-party agency, which is then your programmatic, right? So again, launch, keep going, right? So this is 1 month before you launch, you're kind of making those investments. And guys, you also might be looking at other kinds of media placements. And so when I'm thinking media placements, I'm thinking direct mailers. Maybe you're also thinking about things like a newsletter blast, partnerships email list, right? Those are the kinds of things that you're going to probably orchestrate more of in the beginning, because you're going to want to launch with a bang, and then you're going to probably test that to see what is a worthwhile investment ongoing. So many things to consider, guys. I know it's a lot. I told you it wasn't going to be side, but I did promise it would be informative and super necessary. So as we're kind of looking at these different ways of being a launch budget together, I just want to remind you guys, we are going to be hosting a kind of a small masterclass through Embark. It's just going to be a few people. It's happening shortly as a live session. So if you guys are kind of working on budgets right now, and you're like, holy bananas, I think about that, or some support in working through my budget planning, please make sure you head over to Embark Live and sign up for this kind of masterclass. I think it's going to be really useful. But let's continue. And guys, if you have questions right now or anything's coming up for you vis-a-vis financial planning, let me know, and I'm happy to kind of jump into some specific questions on budgeting. Okay, so marketing budgets can greatly vary. The rule of thumb here is, typically 30% of your sales goes back into your marketing budget. However, right, when you're just starting off, much more, you're not making any money, right? So you need to be looking at marketing in the beginning stages of your business as not necessarily a scalable component, but as something that is a must-have in order to even get you to a baseline. So when I say that, I mean be prepared to spend $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 a month on your marketing, regardless of any sales. And so if you think about a launch being about 6 months long, at the low end, spending about $3,000. If that seems like a stretch to you, then you might be asking yourself, well, who do I know in the world of advertising and marketing that I can lean on? So remember, at scaling retail, we always say it's a trade-off. It's either money or time, right? It's who you know. There's got to be some sort of leverage and access points. So if you're struggling with having the resources, the money, then you need to get really crafty about who you know and leveraging asks, right? To leverage who you know in order to make those deliverables. Okay. So we've got this kind of this little bit more amorphous, this amorphous marketing budget, which honestly I can imagine is probably the scariest for most people. As we're looking at kind of the other tier of your launch budget, right, we should also keep in mind, obviously, things like your cost of goods, product. And again, I'm a huge fan of saying, let's not go and blow it out the window and just go big on inventory. You guys have all been reading and hearing about the industry kind of imploding on itself and how important and now in this time period to be very lean on action and focus so much more heavily on distribution strategies and on marketing strategies. So as we're kind of taking a closer look at what your cost of goods looks like, my question, the way that I would almost look at this launch budget is, what is the lifespan of the inventory that I am producing, right? What is that lifespan? Is it where I can produce these garments and I am producing so little that my expectation and anticipation of sell-through is going to be, 70% sell-through in 3 months, right? Like, am I buying 100 units? Am I buying 1,000 units? So that kind of launch budget, when it comes to your cost of goods, the reason why it's so valuable and so important is that you really have to ask yourself, well, what is the release schedule of new goods? And if you do not release schedule of new goods, then the issue comes down to the fact that you're basically going to have this collection, and without a follow-up collection, the brand might kind of start to fall apart. So oftentimes young brands will say, well, I'm getting ready to launch this first collection. And my problem with that is, well, what about the second? What about the third? And if you've spent all of your money on this first collection, what chance are you giving your brand to be able to have follow-up and to be able to continue to produce and develop? Because it's about continuity. You don't need to have a new product every month, right? You don't have to have a new product every year, but it's about going into your product launches and your brand launches in a very, very intentional way. Whatever you do needs to be intentional. It needs to come off as intentional. So as you're launching, guys, think 6 months out, think 1 year out, right? Think about your launch budget in terms of, again, the costs that I need to get there, but then make sure that you're setting up for yourself the opportunity to be able to say, now I've hit these KPIs and these metrics, and now I know I'm ready for a shot of investment in order to help my business get to this next step. So those are some ways of starting to think about budgeting and planning, right? You don't want to spend everything at once. You want to spend the right things, right, in the right spaces. So as we're kind of looking at the right capital investment into your business in the beginning, you are going to want to spend setting things up the right way, even if it means from a capacity building standpoint, the people you end up hiring later down the road operationally are cheaper. They're going to be building off of something that's very strong and stable and solidified. That, I think, is super, super important to understand. It's not build something scrappy and deep and then hire amazing people to get better, right? To then like work with that. You actually want to build something that's very solid and strategic and well positioned, and then play with your capacity building with hiring in order to basically get the right execution out of it. So kind of flip the way you're looking at it. Spend more money later. Don't ever hire the intern or the junior person if they don't actually have a solidified or strong strategy to be able to build off of. Right? That's, I think, is very important. Okay. All right, guys, I'm almost done here with my time kind of talking about some resource planning and how we're looking at launching brands. If you guys do have questions or you want to kind of continue this conversation, make sure you embark live and we can schedule something and kind of get you in a small group or even a one-on-one to answer some of those questions. But remember, you're playing a long tail game here, right? So the major point here at the end of the day is not about making an amazing launch and then not being able to follow through, right? This is about creating an amazing brand, creating an amazing platform, and then being able to execute in very scrappy ways. And that normally means, right, if that is the approach that you're taking, you're going to want to build that out over a longer period of time, right? And that, I think, we don't often take consideration. Hey there, thanks for joining. Thanks for the hello. Do you guys have any questions? Is there anything else that I can kind of go over or uncover? It is not advisable, I would say, in the beginning stages of your startup to penny pinch yourself. So if you find yourself at the beginning saying, I only have $5,000 and I need to spend every single penny in the most judicious way possible, I'd say for $5,000, you're probably not going to be able to do much. So make sure you're leveraging and looking at where you have opportunities of abundance within your own networks. So opportunities of abundance might be like, oh, my LinkedIn is super, it's filled with such amazing people. I can tap into these people in order to leverage and in order to get more things done. Or I'm part of these Facebook groups, or I'm part of these Instagram groups, or whatever it is, right? I follow these people. Like here's how I can kind of further get involved, right? Like with getting more access to things abundantly for free. Otherwise, it becomes really a matter of who you know and dollars that you have to invest behind it. All right, guys, that is all from me. I hope everyone has an amazing week. It's been certainly exhausting over here, I think, in the turn of this, and gosh, days are getting better, and it's a lot going on. I mean, I'd say some parting words of wisdom, guys. Please make sure that you're ready for Q4. We've only got 6 days left in this month. And while I know there's so much frustration on when is the end of COVID, and we have an election coming up and so many other components and things happening, remember, is business to be done, and people can making significant amounts of money during this holiday. One of them, one of those people who are interested in doing Q4, I would say to stay in touch, because we can certainly support you in realizing what those things are. All right, guys, I will talk to you later. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week. Thanks.